another question was, if an unmarried couple has sex, are they married in God's eyes? Because that floats around sometimes. I'm not going to say in what kind of communities, all kind of communities, because it comes up. And basically it is part of the becoming one flesh physically, but the short version is the Bible describes that's not marriage, that's actually fornication. Okay? So it takes more than just a physical relationship to create a marriage. I went into that earlier. Okay? It's just to give you an idea, I'm looking at the places here where the Bible condemns fornication along with other forms of sexual immorality, and that would be Acts 15:20, 1 Corinthians 5:1, 1 Corinthians 6:13, and verse 18, and 10:8, and Galatians 5:19, and Ephesians 5:3, and Colossians 3:5, 1 Thessalonians 4:3, and Jude 7. I mean, it's crystal clear, and especially I see that about 3/4 of those or more written by Paul, the Torah teacher, and Paul's an awesome Torah teacher, that clearly just having sex is nothing more than fornication, okay? And so it gives, there's nowhere in the Bible that gives you that idea that alone is enough, okay? We talked about covenant marriage, and covenant marriage requires more than that. It requires this... I'm going to do covenant marriage in a second. I'm going to show you some historical parts of that. But just to answer the question, if they are unmarried couple just has sex, are they married? Absolutely not from a biblical standpoint. Now, what can happen and what does happen very often is we develop, and I mentioned them earlier, ungodly soul ties, particularly if this relationship goes on a little bit and then they're broken off, where you get that emotion, you start to get that emotional bond. It's not inside of this covenant relationship. So very often the two just eventually just walk away from each other because God's not involved in it. And so you walk away with these ungodly soul ties, which really need to be dealt with later. While I've got my screen pulled up, my Bible here, I'm gonna move to a second part of this. And that is, what if they lived together for a long time? It was common around the world, and even in America up until not many years ago, something called common law marriage. John 14. And I'm going to show you. So that's where a couple just lives together for a period of time. And typically, I think most places would say after 7 years, you're automatically married. And what they're looking at, once again, is contract law. It's kind of the quacks like a duck theory. They're acting married, and after a certain period of time, the state's going to recognize it. The question is, does God recognize it? I'm going to show you a story that you're very familiar with, but once again, one of the things we kind of miss here is crystal clear. Yeshua is involved here. That there's no common law marriage in the Bible where you just become married after being together for a while. Marriage is not a feeling. Marriage is not it's not that you've lived together long enough that now you're married. Look at what it says here. So Yeshua's come to the Samaritan woman. He's describing, kind of talking about drinking and drawing me water. And, you know, Yeshua's talking to the lady in verse 13 here. It says, whoever drinks this water, is talking about him. Whoever drink, if you drink the water out of the well, you're going to be thirsty. Whoever drinks the water that I give, and he's talking about the Ruach, of course, the water that I give, he will become a well of water springing up to eternal life or everlasting life. And she's like, give me this water. You know, I don't want to, she's still thinking physical, that I don't get thirsty. I don't want to have to come here to draw. And he says, go call your husband and come here. Okay. And the woman answered, and she said, verse 17, she said, I have no husband. Yeshua says to her, you have spoken well when you said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, but the one who you have now is not your husband. That you've said truly. What's he just say? Okay. And does she get it? She's like, I perceive that you're a prophet. It's like, she goes back and you know what she told people? She said, I met a man that told me everything I ever did. So think about what she just said. She's living with a man. He said, you've had 5 husbands, but the one you're living with now is not your husband. Why? They're just living together. That right there destroys any concept that you may have that just living together is good enough, or that, that there's common law marriage in the Bible. There clearly is not. He didn't say you've only been living with him 3 years. Once you've lived with him 4 more years, no. It's not there. It's not a biblical concept. All right. So that answers that question. Let's see.